All right, Jonathan, you ready to begin? Let's do this. All right, so thank you for coming out, Houston App Aficionados. This is, I believe, our 5th month doing it. We started back in May and took a month or 2 off. And this will be our last one in 2012, so thank you for coming out and supporting. If you are on social media and you would like to comment on anything you're seeing tonight, we have several groups that we've got a Twitter account, App Aficionados. Sorry? Oh, okay. Very good. I've got my cameraman over here, so we can do a screencast later. So we've got a Twitter account at App Aficionados. We've got a pretty active Facebook group. In the past 2 months, we've also used a meetup.com group, so or meetup.com meetup. So if you want to comment on anything you see tonight, you want to highlight apps that maybe I don't cover, but you think are notable, please post them on one of those. Now, since there are a lot of new faces in the room tonight, and a new one coming in right now, I'm really glad that we have some fresh faces. The reason we got this started back in May was really to get people that are passionate about mobile in the same place at the same time. And we really want this to be a networking event, so I'm thrilled to see everybody kind of talking to each other before we kicked off, and I hope we can have an opportunity to do that at the end as well. Now, this month is kind of a different theme. In past months, we've said, okay, we're going to talk about only videography apps, or only football apps, or only photography apps. Well, because October was such a prolific month for tech, and all these tablets in front of me here are kind of indicative of that, I wanted to talk a bit about the hardware and the OSs that run on that, and then we're going to talk about some of the notable apps as well. Once we kick back off in January, we'll probably go back to a more app-centric focus to be in line with the name. And the people that we encourage to come out to this and present, we've had some really, really good ones in the past. We want people that are top of their field, who are using these types of apps every single day. So the very first one we had 2 of the best mobile photographers in the Houston area come out. So the idea is you get to learn from the people who probably know this stuff best. So since we do have a lot of new faces in the room tonight, I want to go around the room, introduce yourself. If you could tell us how you found out about the group, that may be helpful to recruiting new members in the future. What you do, why you're interested. I'll start. My name's Justin Western. I'm the group co-founder with a gentleman named Kelsey Ruger. We came up with this idea as part of a hackathon in the spring. The idea, like I said before, was that we could get people in the same place at the same time, share the best apps that are out there, learn from each other, ideally. By day, I work at Chai One, a mobile development company here in Houston near the Westheimer area. We build a lot of cloud apps, a lot of enterprise apps, but I also tinker on the side. Big football fan, so I have an Auburn football app that I developed, and I'm a huge gadget geek, as you can probably see from this table. So why don't we start with you next?
All right, my name is Greg Adams, the company Mobile Apps Labs, and we develop local business apps, and we also do newsstand apps.
Okay.
Keel Head, work for Open Labs, and I'm also the organizer for the Google Developer Group, which meets here at the start also. And I heard there was beer, so.
Sold.
I am Cesar Bielmas. I run a local company called New 27, and I am too looking for development talent. We primarily deal with companies in the hospitality industry and restaurants at national level.
Great.
So we always have good momentum, and that's what we're here for some talent.
Okay.
And I heard about it through Meetup.
Through Meetup, okay.
Hi, my name is Eric Paredes. I work for a software company here in DC called Triple Point Technology. I found out about this group through that Meetup website as well.
Okay. Great.
Hello everybody, and my name is Arun, and I work with Justin at Chai1, and that's all I know about this. And I'm also a fan of all the gadgets and the apps, and I always get to learn a lot of things from coming here. So,
and he graciously lent his Kindle Fire HD for the presentation tonight. So, okay, yes sir.
I'm Brian. I've been to a meeting here before a couple months ago, but someone else was organizing it. I don't know.
There are lots of meetups here, so yeah, it could have been many people.
Now, I'm not a developer, but I like to meet developers. I'm heading a startup venture, and yeah, it's cool. These meetings, learn a lot of, get a lot of new information and meet a lot of people. So, and I found out about it because I've been here before, and it was on the website.
Okay, good. Okay, yes, sir.
What's going on, everyone? My name is Femi, and I guess if I say I'm an accountant working at an oil and gas company, and I found out about this group, True Meetup as well, and I'm working on a couple of startups, and I just want to write about various and meet people, they can bring to them more. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Cool. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Jim Zableski. I'm part of the permit team that wants to start doing using this last time. Also part of Google.
Cool.
I work at Platform here today because I'm month free there, but I also am here at least 2 or 3 times a week.
Nice.
And I'm also helping organize Nexus.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
I'm Dawn. I'm with Conche Consulting. I give my coffee and say tell you about this.
Okay, fair enough.
My name is Edward. Conche Consulting. We're pretty much a business development, marketing, sales firm. We've taken quite a few applications, specific applications to specific industry, all the way through creating the entire marketing plan, marketing strategy, business plans, etc. for whatever types of applications are done.
Okay.
We also have a lot of resources for, I guess you can say, offshore work, overseas type applicational work.
Okay.
So there's a lot of technologies and different things that we're also dabbling in here locally.
Okay. Fantastic. And we had one other gentleman join us in the back. We're doing introductions, what you do, how you found out about us, and what you want to get out of it.
Okay, my last name is Abe, my first name is Olawa. I'm applications and web developer.
Okay.
And I came across this on the internet. I was looking for a group in Houston
Okay.
where I can work with people with the same ideas and all that. That's why I'm here today.
All right. Very good. Kindred spirits. I think you'll find them. Okay, so before we dig into each of the specific devices, one thing I like to lead off with every month is a highlight of some notable apps that either were released within the last month, had significant updates within the last month, or were just, I guess, on the top of my list to use within a given month, truth be told. So I'm going to AirPlay these from my iPad now and show off. By a show of hands, does anyone know the creator, Lauren Brichter, behind Letterpress? Have you heard of him before? So if you've ever used an iOS device and you have the little pull down to refresh, he invented that. Okay. He had a third-party Twitter client called Tweety at the time. Twitter ended up buying Tweety, made it the official Twitter client for iOS and Mac. And then he left the company. They went a different direction, Twitter did. And he went off and developed his own organization called 8-Bits, and their first app that was recently released is called Letterpress. If you've ever played Words with Friends, it's kind of like that, but it's less frustrating and not owned by Zynga. So I'm going to purport that those are all good things, and you guys can laugh at me if you want to.
And what was the name?
Lauren Brichter is the name of the gentleman who, I think he's the only employee at 8-Bits, aside from maybe a marketing person, but he is one of the kind of trailblazers in iOS development. He worked at Apple in the early days during the when the iOS was being developed for the iPhone.
So there's a little bit of an accent. Did you say Lauren or Lauren?
L-O-R-E-N. It's a gentleman spelled.
So
it's
Lauren,
Lauren, but just kind of a funky spelling.
Just making sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's Ashley and Stacy now. So.
And I'm Justin with an O, so I'm just as crazy. All right, so let's launch Letterpress. And I actually have a few games waiting. I intentionally didn't play them so we could show them off here today. So if you're familiar with Scrabble or you're familiar with Words with Friends, the idea is that you want to make a word, right? And you have to choose from the tiles that are available to you. Well, Letterpress is slightly different. So why don't I choose one of my coworkers here? there are different tiles of different colors. And what you want to do is basically have your color have the most points on the board. And the way to do that is to make words. You can use letters that have already been played by another person. But let me see if I can quickly choose a word here. So my color is blue, so I want to steal his tiles that are in red. So if I do F-E-V-E-R, you can see the point differential there at the very top. I'm only 5 points behind now, so I'm going to submit that. And this uses the Game Center platform that's baked into iOS. And it was one of the, I guess, most heavily used apps leveraging the Game Center platform. And the week it came out, Game Center kind of crushed or crumbled under the weight. So there are a lot of folks using this app. It's a lot of fun. I played probably 100 rounds of this over the Thanksgiving holidays, so be warned, it's addictive. It's called Letterpress. All right. The next app that I want to show off is one called NetBot. So there is a app development firm called Tapbots, and their first app released back in 2008 was one called WeightBot. It was a really cool robotic way for you to track your weight. So every single day you'd step on your scale. It wasn't connected to your scale or anything, but you would say, okay, I weigh 150 pounds, or oh no, I weigh 250 pounds, or whatever it is, and you tap it, and it has these really cool custom animations that looked unlike anything else that was on the iPhone. Well, these guys have continued to kind of set the mark, or set the bar as far as UI and UX and in iOS development. And they originally released an app called Tweetbot. It was first on the iPhone, then they released an iPad version. So let me pull this back up on Reflection. All right. And the idea is this is a third-party Twitter client. However, as some of you may know, Twitter has put in a lot of constraints for their developer community. They don't allow you to access their API as frequently as they once did in the early days of Twitter. They put some constraints on the way you can use the Twitter fire hose, so to speak. So there's another company called App.net. It's a paid-for clone of Twitter, essentially. And what Tapbots has done is create a clone of their Tweetbot app called NetBot. So the people that are on App.net, of which NetBot is a client, are paying $30 or $35 a year for access to it. So as you might expect, it's kind of the technology elitists, by and large. If you look at it, there's probably only about 50,000 folks on the entire network. Compare that to Twitter, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, right? So if you were on Twitter in the early days, you may remember it was kind of this water cooler-centric type community, right? You could follow the entire fire hose and not be overwhelmed by it. If you try to follow the fire hose from Twitter today, you couldn't keep up, right? Well, with App.net, of which NetBot is a client, I can see, look at the frequency of when I'm getting updates here. So I follow about 50 folks. I got one 5 minutes ago. You can see over there on the right. But if I scroll down here, look, I can see 5 hours back. Now let me switch over to Tweetbot, and let's see how frequently I've been getting hits here. So 8 minutes, 4 minutes, 8 minutes, all the way down. I'm only going 20 minutes back. So I was talking to you earlier, you're talking about curation, right? You filter out some of the noise, you're only following people you really want to hear information from. Well, if you're interested in doing that and you want to hear a lot of geeks talk about apps and technology, App.net, of which NetBot as a client, is a pretty good alternative for it. So that's NetBot running on App.net. Now the next one that I want to show off is an app called Dropcam. So Dropcam is kind of like a nanny cam, okay? It's a wireless webcam that you can put in your house or in your place of business. And they originally released this piece of hardware back in early 2012. I happened to have children in early 2012, so I wanted to put a webcam in their bedroom so I could look inside their cribs when I was at work. So they've had an iPhone app for a really long time, but 2 weeks ago they released their first iPad app. So what I want to do is show you what that iPad app looks like. And hopefully my wife isn't putting the children to bed at this very moment, or else we're going to see that. So what I can see here, if I launch this, is inside my children's bedroom right now. And you can see I have twins, there's 2 cribs. But what's really cool about Dropcam, as opposed to any other webcam you would find, is it's basically an online DVR. So I can go to past events in the lower left-hand corner here, and I should see some activity here of either my wife getting the girls out of bed around 4:56, or my nanny going up to check on them throughout the day. and you can see little thumbnails, although not great right here. If I pull up one from 2:18, you can see my nanny was picking up my daughter at around this afternoon at 2:18 p.m. So if you are a guy who wears a tinfoil hat, you probably hate this, and you think it's creepy. For a dad, this is kind of cool to check in on his children if he doesn't see them all the time. So this costs $9 a month to use the Dropcam service. You can get a free version of it to where you don't have any DVR functionality. You can just basically see real time. But I like to be able to see a week back, and that's what I get for $9 a month. So what's also cool about it is you can export clips from this and save it to YouTube, save it to your hard drive, post it to Facebook right away. Some of the more popular public webcams on Dropcam are of puppies, of car dealerships. There are a lot out there, and I think we may be able to actually access some of them within the app. Let's see, public Dropcams. The puppy cams, I will admit, are absolutely adorable. Lou's Pet Shop. Let's see if anything is going on there. Oh, here's one. This looks like guinea pigs. Well, they're definitely something. Little bitty puppies, it looks like. So if you're an animal voyeur, this could also be very attractive.
What type of cameras do they need then?
So it's a proprietary camera. It's an actual Dropcam manufactured piece of hardware. Actually, let's pull up right quick. Let's see, new page here, and I'll show you what it looks like. Yeah, it looks like that. So it's actually really hefty. You can screw mount it. You can mount it upside down to your ceiling if you want. It's not really weatherized, so I wouldn't recommend putting it outside as kind of like a front door camera. Maybe if you could point it directly from inside your house down the front door, it could be your UPS man cam if you get a lot of packages. We really enjoy it though, and it's been a lot of fun. So that's Dropcam. All right, this next one I just downloaded on a whim a couple of weeks ago, and it's an app called Fave. Now, what's notable about Fave, there's a gentleman by the name of Paul Allen, who is one of the richest men in the world. He was one of the co-founders of Microsoft with Bill Gates. And when you're that rich, you have unique problems. And Paul Allen's problem was a way to manage his ridiculous media collection and be able to figure out which CDs were in which rooms and which DVDs were in which mansion. And this was an app he got custom developed for him alone initially, as a way to be able to manage his media. Well, he realized he actually came up with a pretty cool and unique solution, so he got his app development folks to actually release it to the broader world, and it's an app called Fave. Now, is this eye candy? Absolutely, right? You could probably accomplish the same thing in a spreadsheet or PowerPoint. But Paul Allen has money to burn, so he got something very eye candy-esque. What's cool about this, if I tap on filters down at the very bottom, depending on what subscriptions you have to either Netflix or Hulu, or if you're an Amazon Prime customer, you can toggle these on and off. So you're only searching the media libraries that you have access to. Obviously, we all have access to YouTube by default. If you're within 2 or 3 miles of McDonald's, you probably have a red box readily accessible to you, right? So you can stream some of these directly from the app. Others will tell you the nearest location of a red box kiosk that you can go to. But it's basically a way for you to have access to all the freely or low price available media, or iTunes, for instance, and be able to download it and watch it right away. So it's kind of a mashup of all the different streaming services. So that's an app called Fave. All right, and I think those were the only, apps that I wanted to showcase now. So now let's talk about probably why most of you came here tonight, and it's all this crazy new hardware. So we're going to have to pull some technology shenanigans here to make sure the folks online can see it as well, but I think we can pull it off. So the first thing I'm going to do, I bought this Surface at the Woodlands Mall a couple weeks ago, and they actually were surprised when I said I wanted to buy one. I guess they don't get a lot of customers there, or hadn't to date. That's not a knock against the hardware by any means, but I just don't get the impression that they're selling a lot of them right now, because they reacted kind of surprised. So let me take this out and go over here. By a show of hands, how many folks have played with the Surface so far? Just one? Okay. Arun, where did you play with one? Did you go to the Microsoft store?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, for the folks on the phone, what I want to try to do here, for folks on Google Plus, it's being broadcast live on Google Plus and YouTube right now. So, hopefully that'll sync it up. All right. There we go. All right, you guys can see it online too. And let's make one tweak to make it bigger for them. Screen share. Yeah, that's pretty good. You can see that for the most part. Okay. So aside from maybe not having played with the Surface RT, has anyone else used Windows 8 at all in the audience? Okay, so we got at least one there. So,
15 minutes, by the way.
For about 15 minutes?
And then the hard drive came out and the SSD would go to
Okay.
Not fun operating.
It's a unique operating system.
Unique.
It's definitely unique, and it's a unique operating system. Now we have someone on the live broadcast. All right, on a Chromebook, no less. I played with one of those recently. I really like it.
And I'm fortunate to get my hands on it.
They're hard to come by.
Supply is like out for the whole state of Texas.
Yeah. Where did you find it at?
Best Buy here on Belknap.
Okay.
I stood in line for it.
Wow.
The Galore one, they have so much stuff, like so much right now.
That's called like every day. So we're trying to get a few more here at start as a measure of that.
All right, now the folks online can see again. Okay, so when you boot up the device, let's just show what that looks like. Hopefully that doesn't kill this long term. So spoiler alert, there are a lot of hardware-related issues tied to the OS, which I think you'll see some of as I walk through some of the things here. But first, let me just show some of the notable aspects of the operating system. So this is not Windows 8. So this is, it is and it isn't, okay? And I actually went to a briefing over at the Microsoft offices a couple of weeks ago. The version of Windows that you see on this device today cannot run legacy applications. You can't go to google.com/Chrome and download a Chrome browser on this device. In the same way that iOS is sandbox and you can only, without jailbreaking, get apps from the walled garden of the App Store, this is the same way. So this Microsoft Store thing you see here, it's a curated experience to where you can download applications that have been specifically written for this device. Later this fall or maybe early spring, they will have the official Windows 8 Pro tablets that will allow you to go to apple.com/iTunes and download a copy of iTunes on that tablet. You can do the same thing that you've always done downloading applications. Did you have a comment?
Well, I was saying, isn't that because it's actually running on an ARM processor?
It's running on an ARM processor.
It's the RT version, not the actual.
You're absolutely right. So
Same version as on.
for those of you gearheads that are gadget geeks, x86 are the types of processors that are in Macs or Windows PCs. They've been running on this sort of architecture for a very long time. What you have running in most modern tablets is an ARM architecture. That's the way the chip is architected and then manufactured. So you can't just throw an application that was written for a legacy hardware device onto an ARM device and expect it to work. So that's not immediately obvious. And one of the questions I asked to the Microsoft representative when I was at their offices, if I have it hooked up to a projector like this and I can't see the device that I'm looking at, could I tell, just based upon the visual nature of it, whether it's Windows 8 RT or Windows 8? And he kind of looked sheepishly at me and said no. There's no visual distinction, and the reason I think he looks sheepish is that probably could lead to a lot of confusion amongst customers, right? Like, what am I looking at this time? So what this front layer with all these tiles is something that was originally called the Metro UI. This was pioneered, surprisingly enough, originally on the Zoom and been adopted by Windows Phone 7. To be absolutely honest, it's very modern and fresh, right? It's one of the more modern and fresh OSs that I've seen. On aesthetics alone, I say I would prefer this to the Android operating system right now. But for someone who has grown up and maybe have decades under their belt of using a Windows operating system, this doesn't feel natural to them, right? This looks like some sort of newfangled interface. Now, I will say that there is something for those folks who are scared by the traditional or the Metro UI. This probably looks pretty familiar to you guys, right? This looks a lot like Windows 7 with one notable omission. Can anyone spot what's kind of missing from this?
Start.
There's no start button, right? So how do I launch apps? I'm going to start pulling my hair out. I don't know. They're pretty easy to get to, but what's notable about the Surface RT is the only apps that I can run within this environment right now are the ones that are down on the taskbar. So inexplicably, there are two versions of Internet Explorer on this device. There's the one in the traditional desktop mode, and by the way, there is a cursor on here that you can use to launch in addition to touching on the screen. So this is a version of Internet Explorer, and then I'm touching this, you can't see it right now, but I'm touching a Windows icon on the front of the Surface here, and it brings me back to what is no longer called the Metro UI, it's the Windows Store UI. But this is touch enabled, and you'll notice I have another version of Internet Explorer right here. They're different, right? And they're running in different environments on the device. They will both get you to the internet the same, but you don't really know why you have two versions of the same app on the same device. I went out to the Geek Gathering last month. It's a monthly meetup similar to this one that the guys who run Technology Bytes Radio put on. And Dwight Silverman, the technology writer for the Houston Chronicle, had a Surface on loan from Microsoft. And he was doing what he calls the real-world usage test. So people who had never used this device before, he would put it in their hands. He says, connect to a Wi-Fi network. So for someone who knows the answer to this question, I don't want you to say anything, but does anyone have a guess of where I might need to go to get to a Wi-Fi network, or what I might have to do to the device, touching it or typing something to get connected to the Wi-Fi here? Any guesses? Start button?
SkyDrive.
SkyDrive? Okay. So if I wasn't connected to a Wi-Fi network right now, it wouldn't prompt me right away. So by launching an app, no. Any other guesses? Same sort of thing. It won't prompt you right away in the same way that an Android device or an iOS device will, saying you're not connected to the internet.
Desktop?
Go to the desktop. Okay, that's actually a pretty good guess. So let's go to desktop. And then what would you do once you're here?
Control panel.
Control panel. You're absolutely right. So you go down to the system tray, right, and there's this network here, and I can open Network and Sharing Center.
And to be fair, it tells you in the beginning. It forces you to connect to the network before you can actually.
Once you're there. So if you're right, if it was never set up the first time you unbox it, in the same way an iPad will say connect to a wireless network, it will. But if you're getting it as a present, maybe, right, they haven't connected it to your wireless device, but they wanted to load some pictures on there for you, you would kind of be SOL. So yeah, this looks very traditional, right? You wouldn't really expect to see something like this on a tablet, but it's there. There are also versions, and this is a big selling point for some people, of Real Office. So this is Word down here. It's Word 2013 Preview. So this isn't the final release, and they say if you buy a Surface right now, they're going to give you the full release for free once it comes out early next year. But if you've used a word processor for an Android tablet, or maybe you've used Pages for an iPad, there are certain UI paradigms they employ which make it very easy to use by touch, right? And the one that kind of blew my mind as I was working this over the Thanksgiving holidays is within Excel. So if I do a blank workbook, once I start having data in here, the reliability of these touches is really deprecated. Okay, so is this a true word processing experience? It is, right? Is that a good thing? I don't know. It depends on what you need to do with it. If you're looking to do just quick and dirty calculations and you don't want to use the calculator and you want to have some sort of paper trail, it may make more sense to use Google Drive and use the Google spreadsheet functionality in there. It's conceived in an era in which touch was kind of first and foremost. Excel has been around since the 80s. So this is the traditional desktop. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not what I would expect to use primarily on a touch device though. So if I go back to the Metro interface, one thing that I actually think is pretty cool, so let me go into, let's say, Internet Explorer, okay? And while you can't see on the projector, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of swipe down like a butter knife from the top of the screen, and then I'm going to swipe over to the right. And it's going to give me this little trick to come over to the side. Well, actually, let me get another app first. Well, what's a good one here? Let's do Evernote. And I'll talk a little bit about third-party app support of the ecosystem in a moment. So the idea is, if it would work, and it's not working for me right now, is you can mount these in kind of 25% window, 75% window. It's where you can have two apps viewable to you simultaneously. And if I pull over from the side, you're noticing that I'm getting these little thumbnails, and I can swipe through in the same way that you can use the four-finger gesture on an iPad to quickly go through devices or through applications that are running. The same sort of thing exists within the Surface RT. I don't know why it won't let me pull this up now. At any rate, it exists, although I can't get it to demo here live. Okay, so we've talked about the swipe to split screen. We've talked about traditional desktop. Now let's talk about some actual apps that are on here and are actually pretty good. I don't want this to be a very scathing review of the Surface. It's an interesting gadget. It's not necessarily what I would recommend for the price. This, after tax and the price of the VGA adapter, was $750. So you can get a Nexus 7 for $199. You can get an iPad 2 for $399. And the third-party ecosystem of apps right now is not very robust in the Windows Store. So if you need to live in a Windows world, this could be a very good option for you. But if you're more concerned with having familiar apps and familiar third-party apps specifically, right now this is very green. This is not necessarily a mature platform. But the two apps that I did want to point out, of note, there are no native Facebook or Twitter apps within the Windows Store right now. So if you're interested in using either of those social networks, there is a People app that pulls in information from your various social networks, but this isn't built by Twitter or Facebook. It juxtaposes all of your social networks together. You can see up in the top right, it's connected to Skype, Facebook, Twitter, I think LinkedIn, and one other one. Yeah, Skype, Twitter, LinkedIn, and my Outlook.com account, which I had to create initially, or I was recommended to create by the people at the Microsoft kiosk, so I did.
Do you need to have a Microsoft account?
You don't. You can use a Gmail account. You can use a Yahoo account. They said to get the most value out of the ecosystem, though, in the same way that Apple kind of suggests you use an iCloud account.
Can you use it as a guest or with no profile?
I don't believe so. I think I was asked to make a profile, whether it was tied to my personal Gmail address or a Hotmail address or whatever. But they do ask you to tie it to an email address initially.
You can skip it on the whole recent desktop.
Good point.
When you share the device with someone, how would they use it?
So you're jumping ahead, because that's something that not a lot of tablets provide right now, but with the latest Jelly Bean release for the Google tablets, you can have multiple users of the same device. So in the same way, if you come from the Windows world, you log on, you've got people's faces there, which desktop do you want to see? They do something similar now within Jelly Bean that doesn't exist on the box in Surface. So let's go. So this is the built-in People app, but there's a third-party one called FlipToast that I found out it was a recommendation from a local blogger here named James Kendrick. So in the same way that I had the People app connected to Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, I've got this one connected to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we see some people here playing Powerball. Anybody buy a Powerball ticket in the audience? I didn't either, I forgot. I would have done the App Aficionados next month if I would have won, though. Kidding, still would have done it. But you'll notice everything here is kind of like this horizontal scroll, right? That's definitely the way in which Microsoft wants you to use this device. And after we get done with the presentation, I'll encourage you guys to come up here and actually touch and feel these devices. But when I first picked this up in the Microsoft Store, I thought to myself, this seems best suited for use on a desk, right? Like I don't really see balancing this on my lap and it being a pleasant experience. And I think after having used it through the Thanksgiving holidays, I still have that same assessment. I did try to sit on my couch and balance this with a kickstand out, but my typing reliability went through the floor. When I'm on a desk like this, I'm actually pretty good at typing on it, and I want you guys to be able to type on this keyboard. Very unique, unlike anything else. It's not like typing on glass, like when you're using an iPad, but it's also not like touch typing on a traditional laptop. So it's something in between. When it's on a desk, you're actually pretty good at it. And I saw someone tweet earlier, only Microsoft can make a tablet that makes you go back to your desk to use it. And I kind of feel like that's true. It's best used on a desk, a portable device. So this is Flip Toast, and it allows you to browse your friends. You can do searches in the same way that you can like in TweetDeck over here if I wanted to search based upon hashtags. You see different birthdays. You see photos that people post. So it's kind of like Flipboard. If you guys have used Flipboard before, you link your different social networks to it. You can browse based upon only that network. You can filter with it. But this is probably the best option available right now for Surface RT. There is no Flipboard for this device. Okay. So that is Flip Toast with a fun little toast icon. Now, the last app that I want to talk about here is called Next Gen Reader. And this is a paid app, but and I haven't read the specifics of how this works in Windows Store. Maybe someone in the audience knows. But you can try apps. I think in the same way that you can try apps in the Android or Google Play Store. That paradigm doesn't exist in the App Store for Apple. But this is a $3.99 or $3.99 priced app, and I said I just want to try it. So I wasn't charged, I wasn't asked for a credit card, I wasn't asked to set up a Windows Store account in order to do it. So I just logged on to try it, and it allowed me to download the full version. I don't know if it's going to expire in a few days. I didn't have a chance to research that before tonight. But if you're a traditionalist like I am, and you still like to get your news from RSS feeds, which I do, I have a very closely curated Google Reader account with folders and then subfeeds in it. This is probably the best option available within Surface RT today, to be able to read your RSS feeds. In the Apple ecosystem, you have great apps like Reader to do that, like third-party apps. The web interface within the iOS ecosystem is quite good as well. And in Android, there's a built-in Google Reader app, which is actually quite good. This is the best one. You'll notice I can drill in here to one of my feeds, Apple Insider. It'll pull up over here to the right, and I can read my news. Let's see if there's anything else notable. Go to Google, Google Updates, Google Drive app, and I can read within here. So I mentioned to someone earlier that this device is true 16 by 9. Okay, so that's the aspect ratio of it. By virtue of doing that, they made a particularly elongated tablet. So I've been using this on a desk so far. I've been using it in landscape mode. But the first moment I disconnected the keyboard and I held it kind of like I do my iPad on a regular basis, I felt like I was holding a clipboard, just like I could slap somebody across the face with it, right? It seemed really long, almost like a baseball bat. And after a week and a half of using it, I still feel the same way. It feels best when you're using it as a landscape device. And the Windows key that's down here at the very bottom of the bezel, if you're holding it in portrait orientation, depending on where you're used to gripping it, you can sometimes be brought right back to the home screen inadvertently, because the palm of your hand has a just tendency to go down there unless you're gripping it at the very bottom of the device. But it's really dense hardware, so you have this tendency to hold it more like a book and less like an iPhone, right? So where you just kind of hold it at the bottom edge. So that's the Surface RT. Before I disconnect it from the projector, did anyone have any specific questions about apps they saw here, Any questions about the OS itself that we can share to the broader group?
I still want to know how you connect to the wireless network.
Okay, I never answered that, so, and you've been left wondering. So there is a gesture that you do on the surface to reveal charms. So I'm going over here to the bezel, I'm swiping from the right, and it gets me to an area called settings. And you can see I'm connected to start down there with a little cellular signal. So the first time I walked in here with this device earlier today, I could see the available Wi-Fis. But the first time you pick this up, you've never used Windows 8 or Surface RT, you wouldn't necessarily think to put your finger on the non-touch screen part of the device and then pull to the left, right? By the same token, the first time you use an iOS device, you're probably not inclined to go to the very top and pull down to reveal notification center, right? It's a learned behavior. But if you're coming from a Windows world to this, it's not necessarily intuitive, right? You wouldn't just think of it. Other questions?
Yeah, on that letterpress.
Yep.
Like when you're playing someone, is it like if it's their turn, does it notify you to where?
Yes.
Like sometimes you have to wait a day or so if the person's not responding, or does it just cut off, or how does that work?
So I haven't encountered a scenario yet to where I started a game with someone and then they abandoned me. Like for a week or something. Everyone has played within at least a couple of days. But when you take a turn, you play your round, it does send a push notification via the game center plumbing there, and it'll come to the player's device on the other end saying, it's your turn, this person played whatever word.
Is there like a timeout if it goes past a certain time?
I don't know. Like, I haven't encountered. Everyone has played so far that I've invited to play.
Is that the push notification, is that by Urban Airship?
No, it's through Game Center, right?
Okay.
So it uses the Game Center platform. He's not using a third party. He's not using a roll your own. It's via Apple's approved push notification.
What would you rate it on a scale of 0 to 10?
The Surface?
Entirely, yes. Be honest.
Probably a 6. I appreciate their first foray into doing hardware as a computing device. I mean, they've done keyboards and mice and Xboxes for a really long time. This was a bold move, I would say, on Microsoft's part. The hardware feels really solid. You can tell they invested a lot of time to get there. They made some polarizing decisions on it, I would say, with the form factor, the really pushing the keyboard, the inclusion of the traditional desktop. But I think that the major shortcomings are within the operating system and the lack of third-party developer support. If they could get those squared away, and I honestly hope they do, I could see this being a compelling device in maybe a year or two. But it's not ready for prime time, in my opinion, right now. And it's certainly not worth $750.
What about the battery life?
The battery life, I've only charged it once, and I've been using it heavily for a week. So, I mean, in that sense, it's pretty comparable to an iPad.
What was the complications with the third-party application?
Well, I wouldn't really call them complications. It's more of just taking a wait-and-see approach. So if I have a limited budget and I know I have a substantial user base on iOS or Android, do I really want to divert development resources to build on this platform? Maybe I do, but I don't necessarily know it's a sure thing at this point. So I think that's really the lack of apps is a derivative of that.
So a lot of them haven't moved to use the ARM instruction sets at all, and I think they're kind of waiting to see.
It's a good point.
They're kind of looking at least people I talked to for actual dev and Microsoft stuff, said they're going to wait to see if this is another Vista. Do we turn around and have Microsoft release 8, enterprise is based on 7.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think even in the enterprise space too, people are really taking a wait-and-see approach to Windows 8 in general, right? Like, is this something that is touch-centric really the best way to get work done, depending on my type of industry, right? If I'm a spreadsheet guy, I'm not going to be manually entering data via touchscreen. So if I'm going to be spending the majority of my time in the traditional desktop mode, do I really have an incentive to go from Windows 7, which is a pretty mature and robust operating system, to Windows 8? Or do I sit down a generation, the same way people sat out Vista? Some people are still running Windows XP. There's just not a compelling reason to upgrade. Other questions about this? If not, we're going to disconnect and go back to the laptop.
Is the landscape portrait mode, can you set either way, or does it automatically adjust?
So that's a really interesting question. I think there is a way to freeze it. There is a gyroscope in it and an accelerometer to allow it to know which way to shift. I have had more confusion from the device when I would flip it around than non-confusion. One required a hard reset to be able to get it back into the traditional landscape mode. There also seems to be a bit of a disconnect, and I don't know if it's software related, as to depending on when you disconnect the keyboard and then try to flip it. For instance, if I pick it up with the keyboard attached, flip it 90 degrees to portrait mode, and then disconnect, sometimes that sends it back to landscape mode because that was where you originally connected it. So that's the sort of thing that can be worked on in software, I think. It's just not there yet. All right, so next, why don't we talk about the Kindle next, since we have this already being broadcast from the phone. So let's do this. And as I said earlier, Arun was kind enough to allow us to use his Kindle Fire HD for the purposes of this demo. So I have had very minimal hands-on time with this device myself, but I wanted to include it in the discussion because I think it's relevant. And Amazon hasn't released sales figures from the Thanksgiving holiday shopping season, but they said it was their best weekend ever of selling this device. They had some of them on sale, the original Kindle Fire. But I think a lot of people are going to pick this up because of its price point, right? Right now, you can get it for $199 one version, $159 for the Kindle Fire non-HD version, and the non-HD version was on sale for $129. I mean, that's very much an impulse buy range as a Christmas gift for a lot of folks at that price. So I think it's worthy of talking about because a lot of your friends, family, people could be using this device in the near future, and they may ask you questions about it. So this was the first device released from Amazon that wasn't just a dedicated e-reader, the Kindle Fire ecosystem, that is. And this allows you to run apps. It has streaming apps. It has a reading app, as you might expect, given the Kindle namesake. But there were three that I wanted to highlight on here that Arun and I chatted yesterday, the ones that were kind of best suited for this form factor, for this type of screen. Knowing the internal processing power of this device, you don't really want to put a lot of taxing, 3D gameplay on something like this because they had to make hardware compromises in order to get it at the price point they did. This isn't running the latest and greatest processor, but it is attractive and it's actually good at doing a lot of things. So the first one I want to show off, let me see if I can focus this a little bit. That's a little better. First one we want to talk about is comments. So we need to connect real quick. Arun, you've never been here connected to Wi-Fi. Now let's take the connect to Wi-Fi test on the Kindle. I've never done this before and I don't know how to do it. Let's see if I can figure out how to do it. All right, I'm going to go to shop, taking the approach you mentioned earlier. All right, look at that. I just went to shop, no network connection, so I can go to wireless settings. All right, now I can connect to it. Arun, do you have the app already installed on this device, Comics?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see if I can figure out how to get out of the shop and onto just the apps. Okay, apps. Let's go back a little. Let's see that. All right, very good. Okay, so I'm going to Comics. I guess it's hitting the internet in real time to pull up the most recent comic books here. But the reason we thought this was kind of notable is there's something kind of delightful about reading a book in a form factor that you're familiar with, right? So if you ever read a comic book growing up, it wasn't like an iPad, right? This giant, paper-sized thing. It was usually something smaller, right? You get the Superman or Batman comic book, it was something smaller, and it's very much in line with the size of what the Kindle Fire is. So let's pull up this. Ruben, I may be about to buy some stuff from your device. All right. This says no title, nothing's coming up. Let's see. Did they have any free ones on here so I don't have to buy one for them?
You can buy one.
What's your favorite comic book, Arun? Free comics, all right. Free comics here. The Walking Dead, very good, and it's free. All right, so we're downloading it. And the reason why we thought this was notable is color screen, right? It's not the traditional like Kindle Paperwhite. It's not one you can get, children's books on the traditional Kindles, but they're monochrome, right? And that some of the real value in a comic book is the really bright, popping colors. So with the Kindle Fire HD, you get it in a form factor that's pretty attractive. You can read with this in bed, on your couch. We have The Walking Dead here. Let me zoom in a little bit. I just made that whole spiel about being in color, and this is in black and white. So perfect demo, perfect demo. Okay, so that's the Comics app, which connects to the Comics App Store. Let's get out of this, go back to home. Now the next one here is the Books app. So I toyed with the idea of getting one of the just regular Kindle Fires as a dedicated e-reader outside of one of my iPads or something, and just because the form factor was nice. This is before I picked up a Nexus 7. What's cool about having it on a color screen as opposed to a monochrome screen as well is if there are pictures in it, you get the full value of it. So I know Arun's reading Good to Great right now. If you have a lot of titles purchased within the Kindle store ecosystem, it syncs your highlights, it syncs your reading position. There are a lot of just these really nice features that you get for not buying some books from the iBook store, buying some books from the Kindle library, buying some books from the Google Play store. So even though I have predominantly iOS devices, I always go to the Kindle library to buy mine because I want to be able to pick up on my iPhone where I left off on my Kindle or left off on my iPad. It's nice. I don't have to worry about where I left off. So let's tap this. And Arun was saying, and he uses his Kindle Fire heavily, this is one of your most heavily used apps, right, within the Kindle Fire. So as you can see, this is a pretty good reading experience. And probably one of the major reasons someone would pick up one of these devices. Now, the other one, and I wouldn't have anticipated this, is the shopping app. Actually, let me go back to... So if you're an Amazon Prime customer, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. They do it for a reason. They charge you $80 a year. They give you free 2-day shipping, but then your purchasing patterns change. Instead of going down the street to Walgreens to buy something or going to Walmart to buy something, you're like, it'll be here in 2 days and I don't need it today, so I'm just going to buy it from Amazon. And as you can see here, the interface for shopping on the Kindle is actually really nice. It's a lot better than what you can get on the iOS apps. If you use the Amazon app for iPad, there's a lot of wasted space there. There's a lot of white space that's not doing anything. On this, it's dense, the amount of information, but it's also, so let's go to Amazon Prime. So this is the Prime Instant Video, so I can start streaming directly from here. Let's see, free 2-day shipping. It's just telling me what I would get.
You're going to have low camera.
A lot of camera suggestions because he's a bit of a photographer. Shop digital stores, Earth's biggest selection, so physical products. What's cool about this, I really like the way it's laid out, similar to the website, to where you can drill down by departments right away. The Android or the Amazon app for the iOS ecosystem is very search driven. And while there is a prominently placed search bar here, you can also drill down by departments. And I don't know what your buying habits are like on Amazon, but I search for something, but sometimes I just want to browse, right? And especially if it's a leisurely experience, you're on your couch, you're not at a desk with a very mission-focused thing. If I'm browsing through here, Arun tells me this very, very directly, like his purchase frequency through Amazon has gone through the roof after having gotten this device. That's exactly why they sell it at loss or at cost, right? Because they think they're gonna. It's like the razor blades versus razor argument. They're gonna make up their investment in the hardware because you're gonna buy a lot of stuff from them. You're gonna buy it frequently. So this is one of his most used apps on the Kindle Fire. Any other apps you guys should highlight, Arun, or any questions about others on the device?
Is there a standalone browser?
Standalone browser. So web up top. The Silk one, right?
How is it?
Honestly, it's they say they market it as one of the fastest browsers, but somehow I've compared Kindle versus iPad, opening up New York Times or anything like that. Always iPad beats Kindle in terms of speed. And even just the browsing experience, I somehow don't like it. It gets stuck every now and then. It's just not smooth.
The fluidity to it, it's not, yeah, it's not Silk, it's a misnomer. But some of that's definitely hardware based, right? I mean, it's not the fastest processor. If you have a lot of graphics on the page or there's a lot of tables on there, you know, it can kind of choke up trying to render all those things.
Can you download another browser for it? You can root it, and then get into it, because it's an Android based.
Right, and you can still, but once you root inside of the regular app store, you have
inside load.
And that's a really good point. Yes, this is running the Android OS. If you've ever used the Android OS, this doesn't look anything like the Android OS, right? It's very heavily skinned. I've heard that, you know, Google was kind of pissed off by this whole approach because they basically did an end around. They used all the intellectual property that was open source from Google, and then they don't give Google any of the credit. They don't give Google any of the traffic. They don't send any of the people to the Google Play Store. They've got their own app store in here. I mean, they're totally doing an end around. They obfuscate any references to Android. You won't see Android mentioned, you know, at least you probably, if you go into the About settings, you know, they'll have references to it, but there's nothing visually that you can see here that says, yeah, this is a Google-based product. This is an Android-based product. It looks very, very unique. It's very shelf-based here in the App Store. And to your point, yeah, you can root this thing. It's not the easiest thing to do. I don't know if anyone has had experience rooting devices. I got about halfway down the path of rooting my Nexus 7 in order to do kind of screen playing like this, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I got scared just because I was worried I was going to brick it, and I didn't do it. So maybe I'm a coward. But
Nexus 7 is easier to find out.
Okay, so man, then I.
Nexus 7 is literally one line in the terminal Linux for a couple of minutes.
And I still shied away. I got squeamish.
Some trickery.
Okay, fair enough. So any other questions about the Kindle before we switch devices? No? All right. So next one up, and we don't have to rely, well, let's do the Nexus 7. That's the last one we have to use the camera for. There we go. I guess we should probably do it this way as well. So the first thing I want to talk about on the Nexus 7 here is just some of the upgrades that they did in the 4.2 release of Jelly Bean just a couple of weeks ago. And if you're not familiar with the Android ecosystem, one thing I'll point out too, if you're a gadget geek, a software guy or girl, and iPhone or Apple puts out a new iOS update, as soon as it goes live, and it's usually at about 12 o'clock Central Time or 10 a.m. Pacific Time, you can go to iTunes right away and you can download that from their servers. And you can do it on demand. Okay, with Android, you can't do, well, you can do that if you're willing to do some trickery and install binaries individually, but you can't just go to software update or something like that. Because it's available, they do a phased rollout of the software updates. And I understand why they do it. It's probably to manage server load, so you don't have a ton of people hammering it right away. But if you don't want to do the command line trickery like this gentleman, but you want the software update, you have to wait. One of our absolutely, right? It's just a lot easier. So one of my coworkers got the update, I think 4 days before I did. And I was like, what is this based upon? And he told me it's because Google knows I'm an Apple fanboy. I don't know how true that is, but it was 4 days later when I got it. So, but there are some really cool things that came out in the latest version of Jelly Bean that I want to talk about. The first is this widget stuff. So here on the lock screen, I have my Google Calendar. I've got my Gmail inbox, and hopefully there's nothing too damning in there. Chris Stappen has been SMSing me, so I guess that's pretty damning. Love you, Chris. Okay. But I can add widgets from the home screen here. When I swipe down, you mentioned earlier multi-user support, so I don't have multiple users set up on this Nexus 7 right now, but I could. I could set up my wife an account on here. We can just leave it on the couch, and she picks it up, taps her face, and she has her home screen arranged the way she wants it. She has her Gmail account connected to it, and then when she locks it again, we get both options, and I could just go directly into mine. So I know a lot of people would really like that for an iPad because it's a really good couch computer. You don't want to buy a $500 device for your husband, your wife, your children, right? If you can use one device and everyone shares it, that's pretty attractive. Google is the first major player to implement that. Actually, let me pull up the browser because some things I can't show you on this device because it's actually not supported yet. However, Google does a pretty good job of telling you what it is. So what's new in Android 4.2? So first one tablet mini users, which we talked about. So multiple people can have their multiple settings in there. This one is the one I wanted so bad to work, and to date it hasn't yet. So Google leverages a technology called Miracast. It's an open source or openly shared platform. It's spelled M-I-R-A-C-A-S-T. It's kind of like AirPlay, okay, to where I can wirelessly send the display of my device and actually mirror it as opposed to just sending a video. Now, that's not necessarily clear if you've never kind of worked with these devices before what the difference is. If I'm mirroring something, I can show you everything that's on my screen. I can show you the home screen. I can show you whatever app it is. It doesn't have to be a video. It doesn't have to be a photo. I can show you everything, pixel for pixel, throw it from the device up to a TV. Now, in order to do that, what I've been using today here is an app called Reflection. This basically emulates an Apple TV, so I can AirPlay to it. I can show everything that's on my screen here to my Mac, and I've got my Mac obviously connected up here. I would really love something like that, and I thought Miracast was going to be the answer in Android 4.2. In order to do this, and I've been Googling this every weekend, there is no emulated version of a Miracast device. Right now, you basically have to buy a dongle, usually about $100. And it's an HDMI dongle. You plug it into your TV, and it's kind of like an Apple TV at that point, to where I can mirror what's on my Android device. There is a limited subset of Android devices which actually support Miracast right now, though. This is not one of them out of the box. There's hope that in a point release it will. I think the Nexus 10 does right now.
That's because the NHL protocol
is not supported here. It doesn't exist.
Increase the price of
certainly.
Nexus, so you couldn't have it at $199 if you were able to HDMI directly into it.
Absolutely.
The same issue, we were going to do that here, plug into that HD TV over there, and we went to a micro center to buy the adapters.
The MHL adapters, but they don't work. Yeah. I ordered one as well, and I was kind of sad to find out it didn't work. They're only like 10 or 15 bucks, but so MHL, for you guys unfamiliar, basically it takes a micro USB output from your tablet here, and on the other end of that dongle is HDMI. So you could go directly into a TV like over there. It would effectively mirror. The new version, the Kindle Fire HD, does support that. So it supports mirroring out of the box. To Akhil's point here, it's an additional hardware feature that they have to bake into the device, and it's not trivial. It would have increased the marginal cost by $10, $15, $20, and if you're doing that at scale, that's a very real cost. If that's an important feature to you, though, being able to output via HDMI, or via Miracast in some of these future devices, it's something you want to consider. I had thought actually about selling my Nexus 7 to Chris in the back so I could buy a Kindle Fire HD so I could just get the HDMI out of it. Because obviously for events like this, it's pretty important to be able to demo things. But again, you don't necessarily get all the support for Android apps within the Amazon ecosystem that you do on a vanilla Google device. Okay, so let me go back for a moment to what's new on this. So if you have a a Nexus 10 tablet, which is one of the tablets that Google announced at their event in October, you can do this sharing of YouTube video directly from your device up to your TV via the Miracast protocol. This is something I can show here. So previously, similar to an iOS device, if I would swipe down from the top of the screen, actually it's not on the screen, no it is. If I would swipe down from the top of the screen here, I would get a unified box that I could have a little icon to bring up settings, or I would have a list of my notifications. In 4.2, they separated it based upon where you swipe down on the screen. So if I go to the top left here and I pull down, I get all my notifications. And this little icon up here will clear my notifications. So let me go ahead and clear those. I go up to the top. If I pull down from the top right, I get a different menu. And let's see if we can focus that a little bit. So I've got my settings up there, my brightness control, my Wi-Fi controls. That's how you connect to Wi-Fi, since we're doing this on all devices now. Send it into airplane mode. So depending on where I swipe down, again, you need to know the gesture in order to use it most efficiently. So that's one of the new features in 4.2. What else was notable here?
Are there any phone functions on it?
On this device, define phone functions. Being able to make a call natively from it, or
Yeah.
no. Now there are VoIP apps that I could run from it. I can do Skype from it. It's an equivalent app to Talkatone on iOS. I mean, I could use it for telephoning, for sure, but there's not a phone app necessarily that comes baked into it. No. And this is one, for $199, this is the best tablet you can buy, in my opinion. I mean, this is a really well-built piece of hardware. It gets Android updates really fast. It's got the native Google experience. So if you live in that ecosystem a lot, you got a Gmail account, you leverage Google Calendar, you use Google Plus for Hangouts like we're doing tonight. Like, this is very attractive. I have no regrets on picking this up. The only regret I have about the hardware is I can't get the HDMI out. If it would have had that, it would have been perfect. An absolutely perfect device. There's not MHL hardware support in the device, so I could have bought whatever adapter I wanted. That wasn't the issue. If they released the Nexus 7, Chris, pay attention. If they released the Nexus 7 with that support, this is yours. So then we'll talk. Okay. So this final thing I want to show, I don't want to show it because it's a great app. But I want to show it because it's kind of a funny app for it to be on this. So we talked about the Surface a lot, and a couple days ago, Microsoft released an Outlook.com app for Android. The Outlook.com email service got a lot of fanfare when it launched, I think early summer, and there was kind of a land grab for unique usernames on it. So I tried to get Justin at Outlook.com. I was probably a few hours too late. I did it the same day it launched, but someone had already snatched it up. So I got Justin Western at Outlook.com. The only reason I ever used it was to get the one email address in case I wanted to use it in the future. If I go back into corporate life, maybe they use only Outlook. But this isn't a great app. It's basically a phone kind of optimized app. If you look at it here, I mean, we're not taking a lot of advantage of the additional screen real estate that's present on this device. If I go to home here, I could have multiple Outlook accounts linked from within it. All emails is kind of self-explanatory. And then if I go into just my personal account here, I've got some options that I can do down here. I can check my mail. The account settings is whether I want it by push. I can move between folders. So if you've used the traditional desktop version of Outlook in the past, a lot of the nomenclature here will be very familiar to you, but it's a web-based email service in the same way that Hotmail was. It has a lot of its heritage in the Hotmail ecosystem as well. I don't use my Outlook.com address any, but if you're heavily leveraged in Microsoft, this may be an attractive app for you, and it works on phones as well. So before I move on from the Nexus 7, any questions about maybe features of it, specific apps that we could even download if you want to see them? No?
When I played with it, my big issue too, again, was portrait landscape. Is it locked on yours?
So that's a good question. You raise a good point. So when this came out of the box, we got it in July. It did not support landscape mode within the native operating system here. So I couldn't see this grid-based structure. It would have literally been rotated 90 degrees if I sat it this way. In the 4.1 release, they fixed that. Fixed, quote unquote, as a feature enhancement, right?
Now we're going to slow rollout to everybody.
Correct, slow rollout. I mean, I got so used to using it in portrait mode that the only reason I have it in landscape mode right now is because it works better for this camera. But and I want you guys to come up here and hold it later. The back of it is this kind of rubbery leatherette material, and it feels amazing. Like I just find myself when I'm using it, just kind of like, this feels nice. You know, I feel like I'm petting a cat or something. It feels really good in the hand. You can actually palm this in the same. It's easier to palm than the iPad Mini. The iPad Mini is significantly wider. You can feel it when you're holding it. Like I feel like my hand is stretching when I'm using that. This I can palm, and I don't feel like I'm really exerting a lot of effort. I use it mostly for checking Gmail and using the Chrome browser on it. It's really good at both. The Chrome browser on it's really impressive. And at the end here, I think we'll do a browser test across the different devices so you can see just how quickly it renders. Okay, so now let's go back to the iOS devices. The iPad Mini, which I think will quickly become the best-selling iPad. And let's un-airplay this. Yeah, and while I'm switching devices, you guys feel free to grab a beer over there, by all means. We have lots of it.
Yeah. So what we did the next time, so you go down these stuff. Yeah.
By the way, this is Jewel. She does our photo and video.
Okay. Hi, Jewel.
Put that one. That's the card. And you don't want to say that's kind of like you know, just up would be it's just like, you know, I have a introduction to and then John said he also is there's a national section focused
All right, so what I'm going to show you guys next, this is running on an iPad Mini, and this is my wife's iPad Mini, fluorescent pink cover. Not that I'm not secure in my masculinity, but this is hers, and I borrowed it for the evening, so I appreciate that, Ashley. So before I go into the apps I want to talk about, let's talk about the hardware, because that's really the most notable thing, and you can't really tell anything different than a regular iPad by viewing it on the screen right now. So the first thing you notice about this when you're looking at it is the bezel is much narrower on the left and right hand side, and if I want to, I can palm it, even though it doesn't really feel nice. But it's significantly lighter than an iPad. If you picked up one of these, you know that. And if you're holding it for extended durations, kind of like you would a magazine, like here, just kind of palming it to the side or propping it in your hand like you would an iPhone, you could do this for hours and it wouldn't really bother you, especially if you're propping your elbow up on your couch. When I do that with my iPad, after about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm lifting weights now. It's probably because I'm weak, but I think over time it just makes you feel fatigued. So we have a cover on the back here. If you've seen an iPhone 5 or you've used one at the Apple Store or you have one, you know it has, especially on the black model, this kind of, it looks very scratchable, okay? And there's been a lot of reports about, because it's this kind of anodized aluminum type coating on it, if you throw it on a table or you throw it in your bag and you've got a key in there, something that has a sharp edge, it is very prone to scratching, and I think there's a reason why you're seeing those reports. It will scratch. So we've just got a clear polyurethane case on the back of it here, so she doesn't mind putting it in her purse. Also, the smart cover on this, if you've used a traditional iPad, a full-size iPad before, you know it had those little metal hinges which connected, and over time it could kind of create abrasions on the side of the iPad. This one doesn't have any exposed metal. It's actually, the magnets are contained within this polyurethane cover. So when you're trying to prop it up, like on a couch, if you're using the little triangular thing, it doesn't fold as nice, but it also won't scratch the device. So there are some third-party cases which look a little bit more like the traditional iPad cover, which are sturdier if you're going to be using it kind of propped up as an easel a lot. You may want to explore that, but because this feels so nice in landscape or in portrait mode, you may not find yourself using it in landscape mode as much. Any other questions about the physical attributes of this before I show off the apps? No? This is pretty widely known by this point. So 2 apps that I want to show. One, the Kindle app on this, right? This, I could see myself wanting to get in the next release of the iPad, this, because I do a lot of reading on my iPad. This is a much better weight and form factor if I'm doing extended reading, which I really should do more of. So let's pull up the Kindle app right quick. And I've got a couple of apps already pulled up here. The Steve Jobs biography, which I'm woefully behind on completing. You can see the progress. This Inside Apple. So there's iBooks for this as well if you've got a lot of books already purchased in that. But this just feels right when you're reading this book. It feels like I'm reading a traditional magazine, a traditional paperback book. The form factor makes this app more valuable to me. It just really does. The reading aspect of this device is optimized. The other one I want to show you, it's not necessarily better on this than the iPad, but I didn't show it off last month when it was released, so I wanted to highlight it this month. It's a third-party YouTube app called Jasmine. And what's cool about this is there is no native YouTube app for the iPad yet. There is one for the iPhone. And if you recall in iOS 6, they stripped out the YouTube app that was native within the operating system. What's kind of cool about this is it has a lot of interesting transitions. It's kind of got this pull to refresh thing that Lauren Brichter established or created back in Tweety. And prior to this point release of the version, you could pull up a YouTube playlist and play them gaplessly to where you wouldn't have to interact with it. There was a change in the developer rules for it, and that functionality was unfortunately taken out. But I just really like the aesthetics of this app relative to going to the browser to use it. I mean, it just feels fun. It's got these nice little animations. I can see my top favorited things here. Go to My Videos to view them. It fades into the background. There's a pro version of this, which gets you a bit more functionality. This one's free, and it gets you parental controls. So if you're buying an iPad mini for your child, and maybe you want to lock down some of the apps that are on there, you want to use you want to give them a native YouTube experience, maybe this is a good solution for you. So that is the iPad mini. Any questions before we switch over to the last one? No?
Oh, what is the Amazon app? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, let me pull up the Amazon app, actually. Let me see if it's on here. Yeah, she's just got it on here. So, a lot of white space here, right? Like, not necessarily, especially relative to the Kindle shopping app, like, what is all this stuff up here? You know, like, couldn't I have, and how do I browse by department? So, Arun and I were trying to figure that out earlier. I don't really see an easy way to do that. I can see recommendations. This is going to be mostly baby stuff and video games. Very, very indicative of my life. I can search, right? Searching for a Chromebook here, right? I was looking for one of those, did procure one. Deals, and look at all that wasted space. You know, this is not good layout of an app by any means. If I go to landscape mode, same sort of thing. I just get a little wider view. So the spoiler is, there isn't an easy way to browse by department in the same way I can within the native one on the Kindle Fire. This is definitely searching focus. And it's better to use the website, honestly. Let's pull one up here. Okay. On my regular size iPad, this is usually how I browse it. And what's nice is Amazon has taken into account that a lot of their shopping population is probably coming from tablets. So, you know, you go to some websites, you try to use menus that are drop down and it loses itself because you're not hovering over it because it's a touch experience. On this, it handles that very well. It will make the menu persist on top until you interact with it again or you tap away. So the website within Safari is still very functional. And I can go to movies and music here. And I get the submenus coming up. It's just really well done. I much prefer this over the native app. I'm hopeful they do a rewrite pretty soon. Anyone else on iPad mini?
Do they have an Amazon Cloud Player?
They have one for the iPhone. I'm not sure if they have one for the iPad yet. Let's look. Featured. Amazon Cloud Player. Let's see if this is. Yeah, this is actually something that we encountered in my job recently. If you're searching for iPhone or iPad apps, if you try to type in the exact name and an iPad app doesn't exist, it won't show you the iPhone app within the App Store. I see a knowing nod over there. This causes immense customer service frustration. If people are looking for an iPhone app to run on their iPad and it doesn't work, they think something's very wrong. But if I search for Amazon and just do that search, and then I go to iPhone apps, they will come up here. So Amazon Cloud Player, iPhone apps, let's see if we have an iPad app equivalent. I don't think we do yet, no. So I mean, you can run it on here, the iPhone version, but you're just not taking advantage of the additional real estate. Okay, and before we do the browser tests across them, two other things. Well, actually, I already showed off Tweetbot for the iPad. One thing that I'll show, one final app then, just because football season is mercifully over now for my alma mater. I'm going to focus on pro football. And Verizon, if you've ever watched a broadcast, or not even an NFL broadcast, but television in general, and you're not fast forwarding through commercials, Verizon has a deal with the NFL. They're the preferred provider of the NFL. They have a deal that Sprint did many years ago to where you can stream some games directly to your device on like Sunday night, I think. When I got my iPhone 5, I switched from AT&T to Verizon, and one of the first apps that I got was the Verizon or NFL Mobile for Verizon. So it validates that you're a Verizon subscriber before it will give you the full access to the features in it. There was never an iPad version until a couple of weeks ago, and then they finally released it. NFL Mobile. Let me AirPlay this. So I showcased this one in September when we were highlighting the football apps on the iPhone. And for those of you who are here for that, you'll notice this is a significantly different layout than what you see on the iPhone version. They are taking advantage of the increased screen real estate on the iPad. And so you can do the same sort of thing with pulling up live videos. If you were using this on game day, you could watch NFL Red Zone directly from the app. Right now I only see highlights from it, but yeah, this was a nice addition. I wish they would have gotten it out before the start of football season. It's halfway through now, but still a lot of fun to play with. I'm going to be using it this weekend. So that's it as far as probably what we'll show on the live broadcast as well. I'll let everybody get up, drink some more, socialize, and play with the gadgets here on the table. Unless there are any final questions, we'll wrap it up there.
Honestly, of these two devices, which one do you like better? Or best? Would you say with the probably limited interaction with the Kindle and the
It's honestly context specific. You know, if I'm on, and that's kind of a half-assed answer, and I apologize for it, but you know, when I wake up in the morning, I get a cup of coffee and I use my iPhone on the couch. When I get home in the evening and I put my girls to bed, I use my iPad in the rocking chair in the room. You know, it's.
I mainly ask that because right now, like I've got an S3 and like I've got an iPhone 5.
Right.
You can see any need for anything above 6 to 8 inches. Do you use your 6 or 7 inch device regularly? Do you think?
I don't. I don't.
See, that's why I'm involved.
Yeah, so really good question. So if given the choice of holding these two devices, I will kind of default to this, but that's today. Like if there was a Retina version of the iPad mini and it was nice for extended reading within the Kindle app, my usage patterns may change. But it would probably come at the expense of the full-size iPad and not of my phone. The most heavily used device on any given day is my phone.
Right, okay, that's what I was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's always with you. I almost feel like if I'm using the iPad in a public setting or professional setting, I better be using it for a really specific purpose, but I can use my phone anywhere and it's still socially acceptable, right? But with a tablet, when you're pulling it out, like, hey, why do you have that tablet out? You better be doing something, it's pretty relevant. Or if you're taking a photo with a tablet, you just kind of look like, oh, man, this guy's taking a photo with a tablet. Right. Yeah, it looks weird, right? But yeah, I think the phone will continue to be, and I don't know, how much bigger of a screen I would really want an iPhone. I was a little weary when they...
have you seen the notes?
I have, right? So you're using one. That's a phablet, right? It's a phone and tablet.
Why would you even jump to an iPad? Like, do you mind if you compare at some point your iPad that and then your notes too? Just kind of, okay.
Yeah, we'll line them all up on the table here.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll do a shootout.
Very good. So I'm going to end the broadcast here for the folks online. Thank you for tuning in. Let's see. The hangout is now over. I must have ended it. All right. All right. Then let's spread them out. And end this.